Comes from Luke 15, verses 1 through 7. Tax collectors and other notorious sinners often came to listen to Jesus teach. This made the Pharisees and teachers of the religious law complain that he was associating with such sinful people, even eating with them. So Jesus told them this story. If a man has 100 sheep and one of them gets lost, what will he do? Won't he leave the 99 others in the wilderness and go search for the one that was lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he will joyfully carry it on his shoulders. When he arrives, he will call together his friends and neighbors, saying, "Rejoice with me, because I have found my lost sheep." In the same way, there is more joy in heaven over one lost sinner who repents and returns to God than over 99 others who are righteous and haven't strayed away. There are some stories that only make sense to us, that only make sense once you know why Jesus told them. If we jump straight into the image of the shepherd leaving the 99 in search of the one, we might hear it as a comforting story about God finding us when we've wandered. And it is that, but Luke tells us why Jesus begins telling the stories. He says, "Now all the tax collectors and sinners were coming near to listen. The Pharisees and the scribes were grumbling and saying, 'The fellow sinners, he welcomes sinners and eats with them.'" Now, that complaint is the whole reason for the story. It wasn't that people were upset that Jesus forgave sinners. They were upset that he welcomed them, that he shared a meal with them, that he acted as if they belonged before they had an opportunity to prove that they did. And that was offensive. It wasn't theology, it was Jesus' hospitality. Now, I think every generation has its own version of this. There will always be people we quietly decide are outside of the circle. People whose politics are too different, or whose lives are too messy, whose addictions have gone too far, or whose marriages fell apart, whose questions make us uncomfortable, or whose tattoos or language or income or immigration status or sexuality or past become the first thing that we notice about them. We may never say that they don't belong. We just simply act as if they should clean themselves up before they come any closer. And the Pharisees would have understood that. What they couldn't understand was Jesus. Jesus keeps eating with people who haven't earned a seat at the table. In the ancient world, meals really mattered because you didn't simply share food with somebody, you shared the identity with them. You declared fellowship. You said, "I see you and you belong with me." So when Jesus sits down with the tax collectors and sinners, he isn't just having lunch, he's making a theological statement. The religious leaders think that holiness means distancing themselves from broken people. Jesus seems to think that holiness looks like moving closer. The Pharisees ask, "Why would a holy man eat with sinners?" And Jesus answers, "Let me tell you about a shepherd." The story itself is almost absurd. Suppose one sheep wanders away. The shepherd leaves 99 in the wilderness, and he goes searching for the one. Now, if you run a business, this sounds kind of irresponsible. If you're managing risk, that sounds foolish. If you're keeping score, that math just doesn't math. The 99 is a pretty good success rate. And most organizations would celebrate that. Most churches would celebrate that. Most of us would. But love has never, ever been impressed with percentages. Love notices names. Love notices faces. Love notices absence. And love counts until something precious is missing. This is the mathematics of grace. The world measures success by what remains. God notices what's missing. The world asks, why risk everything for one? And Jesus asks, how could you not? The kingdom has a very different kind of arithmetic. One lost child matters. One lonely neighbor matters. One addict trying again matters. One grieving widow matters. One teenager wondering if anyone would notice if they disappeared matters. One person sitting quietly on the back row wondering if there's still room for them matters. To everyone else, they may be one among many, but to God, they are never one among many. They are the one. But here's the question that keeps pressing on me. Who's actually lost in this story? We naturally assume it's the sheep. And certainly it's wondered, but remember why Jesus told the parable. The Pharisees are standing nearby. They're watching, complaining, grumbling because mercy's become a little too generous. Could it be that they are the lost ones too? Not geographically, but spiritually and emotionally. They become so committed to protecting holiness that they no longer recognize holiness when it sits down at a table with sinners. They know the scriptures, they know the commandments, but somewhere along the way they've forgotten what God's heart looks like. Is it possible? It's possible to be close to religion and far from the heart of God. It's possible to know every answer and still miss the point. I wonder if that temptation still exists, not just out there, but in here. It's surprisingly easy to convince ourselves that we are simply protecting truth, when in reality we're protecting our comfort. Sometimes we'll call it discernment, or we'll call it wisdom, or we'll call it accountability. But underneath, it can be something much simpler. We're deciding who deserves our welcome. Jesus keeps refusing to play that game. Notice someone else. Jesus never says the shepherd scolds the sheep. There's no lecture, there's no guilt trip, there's no demand for an explanation for leaving. The shepherd simply lifts the sheep onto his shoulders and carries it home. And that's the image that should move us, because most of us carry enough shame already. We already know where we failed. We already know where we wandered. We don't need one more voice to remind us of our worst moments. What we long for is someone strong enough to carry us home. And that is who God is. And then comes the surprise. The shepherd throws a party. He calls his friends together. He says, "Rejoice with me, for I found my sheep that was lost." The story ends with joy. It doesn't end with suspicion or probation or embarrassment. It ends with joy. The religious leaders can't celebrate because they're keeping score. God celebrates because God is keeping people. And that's the difference. The church has to decide which story it wants to tell. Will we be known for guarding the gate? Or will we be known for setting another place at the table? Will people believe they have become worthy before they belong? Or will they discover what so many people discovered around Jesus? That belonging is often the very thing that begins transformation. Perhaps that's why Jesus welcomed sinners before they had everything figured out, because love changes people in ways that rejection never can. Grace has a way of calling forth the very life it freely gives. Maybe today you feel like the sheep. You have wandered further than you intended. Life happened, grief happened, fear happened. You look up and you wonder if you've gone too far. Hear the good news. The shepherd is already looking. Not reluctantly, not angrily, not because you've earned another chance, but because this is simply who God is. Or maybe today you recognize yourself in the crowd of religious observers. Maybe you've grown cautious with your compassion, careful with who you welcome, quick to categorize, slow to rejoice. If so, the invitation is not condemnation. It is simply to step a little closer to the table where Jesus is already eating. Because that's where we discover the heart of God. A God whose love has never been calculated by percentages. A God who leaves the 99 because every single person bears the image of God. A God whose mathematics have always been strange. Where one lost sheep is worth the journey. Where one life is worth the search. Where one person is still worth rejoicing over. Perhaps the greatest miracle of all is that every one of us has been that one sheep at one point, and every one of us has been carried home. Well, let's do our prayer of confession and assurance. God of abundant mercy, we confess that we do not always love as you love.
We are quick to judge, slow to welcome, and hesitant to forgive.
We draw lines between who belongs and who does not.
We forget that your grace belongs to us again and again.
Forgive us when we care more about being right than restoring relationships.
Open our hearts to rejoice whenever anyone finds their way home.
Hear the good news. In Christ, the shepherd seeks the lost, carries the weary, and welcomes us with joy.
Because